shared here. So I suppose one could say that tonight's user group is sponsored by CapStorm. If I look tired, it's because I am. My sons and I left our house this morning about 7 a.m. And what we thought would be an easy day's journey actually ended up showing up at the wrong hotel. Apparently, there's 2 Crown Plazas in Orlando. So I quickly put our RAV4 rental into sport mode and turned into Super Dad on the expressway on the wind. But anyway, I'm really pleased to be here. Marlene, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure, of course. My name is Drew Neerman. I look after go-to-market at CapStorm, so that it's kind of a combination of sales, marketing, and technology all mashed together. And my goal tonight is to tell you a little bit about how we're helping mid-market and enterprise customers, Salesforce customers, specifically in highly regulated industries with sensitive data, manage their Salesforce investment. So just by a show of hands, has anybody here ever heard of CapStorm before? There's a couple. Okay, maybe 1 in 4. All right. Yeah, I certainly hope so. We are a Salesforce data management platform, and I'll just start by saying what we do is not for everyone. So there will probably be some of you here who think, that's cool, but it's not really for me. And there's going to be a handful of you that say, oh my gosh, I did not know that existed. That's exactly what I need. So whoever that happens to be tonight, I hope that we get to help you think about some technical Salesforce data related problems in a different way. I'm going to give you a little bit of a background story on us. We are a founder-led bootstrap company operating with no institutional investment, and we've grown over the past 13 years to have customers in 48 countries. So it's a story that we're really proud of. And the way that happened is our founder and CTO worked at a biotech company in the St. Louis, Missouri area, and was tasked with an acquisition merging 2 different Salesforce orgs together. So around 2006. And at the time, there was no tooling available on the marketplace. I think the app exchange was barely a dream at that point. So he said, there's no way we're merging these 2 companies' CRMs with spreadsheets and data loader. So he wrote software, the CapStorm software, eventually delivered the project, and then a few years later asked for the intellectual property rights from his company to own the IP, put it up as an open source project online, and the downloads just started flying. So he pulled it offline, came home to his wife and 6 children who just got done getting their youngest through middle school and said, hey, honey, what do you think about starting a software company? So that was January 2011, and the rest is history. Now, the reason I asked who's heard of us before is that we're not, we haven't raised $500 million of funding. So we are a relatively small company specializing in software, not services. That said, we do have a global reach. And here's what I live and breathe for every day at my job. I take Salesforce customers, again, in highly regulated industries that have the most complex and technical data-related challenges and help them solve those challenges by giving them ownership and control over their data. Now, there are a lot of solutions out on the market. I'm not even going to pretend that we're the only one, because we're not. But I will tell you what makes us unique and different, and hopefully that is some useful information for at least one of you. Skipping ahead here a little bit. It's a basic architecture diagram. Given the audience that we have here tonight, usually these pictures speak more loudly than words. This is a very basic DR use case, disaster recovery, for those of you who may have not heard the acronym. The way that we give our customers ownership and control over their Salesforce data is by replicating the schema, the metadata, and the data from Salesforce into the customer's own relational database. So for those of you who are online, I'll move my mouse pointer around a little bit. This CopyStorm application, Restore application, and database icon, those are all inside of the customer's firewall, as indicated by the little gray box there. And that's designed to show that when the Salesforce data model is replicated into the customer's database, no one has access to it. No one can see it, touch it, store it, access the systems or networks except the customer. So as a vendor, we have zero visibility into that. It is completely under the customer's control. Now, Sort of by accident, around 2014, we started, again, almost accidentally, landing large contracts within the top 10 pharmaceutical companies. We did roughly 7 of those over the course of a couple of years. And what we found is that in financial services, the United States federal government and financial services and healthcare, HCLS, they want to go SaaS first, but they cannot be SaaS only. There's a need for enterprise data teams to be able to integrate with Salesforce. They're often a multi-org implementation where they have 15 or 20 different orgs. They sometimes need to acquire companies, divest business units, take the data and metadata from one production org into another, or split it off. My personal favorite was a one org split into 13 separate production orgs as a part of a streamlining that was a wealth management firm. But anyway, the way that this works, CopyStorm could be called our flagship application. It incrementally replicates the data, schema, and metadata from Salesforce as often as every 3 minutes. So if we're thinking about a backup and recovery use case, you have control over your backup. You can access it, you can verify it, you can test it anytime you want, and it's not once a day. Additionally, by virtue of being in a relational database format, like a Postgres database, SQL Server, Oracle, MySQL, you're preserving the referential integrity or the relational nature of that relational data model so that it's not split apart in CSVs, and you don't have to do VLOOKUPs and patch a bunch of record IDs and stitch everything back together for recovery, for sandbox seeding, for org-to-org migrations, and the like. So I'll pause here. We're going to start kind of at the foundation with the really basic use case, and then expand out to think, what could we be doing with our data to solve the most complex problems? Does anyone have a question with what I've discussed so far on the basic replication to the database and use it for DR use case?
Yes.
Chris.
Is that database owned by the client? Or
Yes, it is.
Your database that you're
It is owned by the client. Yeah. So we in 2011, from 2011 until 2019, our go-to-market was the on-prem backup and recovery experts. We did a customer audit, a little over 200 customers at the time, and found out that roughly 90% of those customers that bought for a backup use case were actually using the near real-time replica to enable downstream reporting with Power BI and integrations with other ERP systems we had no idea about, because it's their database behind their firewalls, and they were drawing an enormous amount of value from that off-platform replica just by virtue of having ownership and control. I'm going to specifically ask the online group if they have any questions, because I'm not sure how easy it is for them to chime in. Okay, I see a oh, Marlene kind of answered this, but I'm going to humor the question just in case anybody else is wondering it. What happens if the CapStorm service goes down? So I'm assuming this is probably like an uptime, downtime, observability, reliability type of question. The CapStorm applications live on an application server or VM in the customer's private cloud, or literally on their own bare metal. So it is up to the customer to maintain their own infrastructure. We have zero access and zero control over it. So I like to say, can you trust anyone more than you can trust your own staff? So I hope, Christine, I hope that answers your question a little bit. If you want to maybe send a follow-up, I'd be happy to address it. All right, so I'm going to skip ahead a few pictures here. There we go. And we're going to talk about expanded uses for optimizing Salesforce data. Many of the clients that I work with, they're mostly enterprise in category. The idea of having Salesforce data only in Salesforce just doesn't work for them. Salesforce is one of 98 applications that they use, and yes, it is their primary CRM, but they have other systems of record, and sequestering that data to Salesforce only just is not an option. So I'm going to kind of walk my way around this visual map here, but please, if anyone has a question, cut me off, because my goal is to hit lots of different use cases. And if something jumps out at you, let's talk about it. So following my little mouse pointer here, we've talked about replicating the force.com data model into a database already. By far, the most common use case for this off-platform replica is analytics. Power BI being the most common, or SQL Server reporting studios, something like that. There are lots of queries that a business stakeholder would want to ask of their sales and marketing data that traditional Salesforce reports and dashboards simply cannot support. Queries are too complex. The type of query that you want to ask is not allowable in Salesforce, or the data volumes are just too large and the query will choke and give you an error. Happens to me all the time personally. You'll also notice that on this little database icon is a shield. So that was done intentionally. When our software replicates Salesforce into the customer's database, it will detect what you have as classified data or sensitive fields or encrypted fields in Salesforce, basically allowing you to replicate the who sees what policy from Salesforce into your database at rest, so that if you do need to set up some sort of enterprise service bus or enterprise integration, ETL platform, data enrichment, reverse ETL, you can know that you know that you know that whatever policy or sensitive data you have here can be replicated down here, so that Bob can query objects 1, 2, and 3. Tom can query 4, 5, and 6, but Ted can only query 10 or 11. I'm just kind of making it up, kind of like a gym locker room scenario. As far as making sure that that data remains compliant as it moves about the enterprise data fabric, have the ability to support this as well. I'm going to check the chat again for questions. Anybody in the room here have a question? Yeah, hit me.
How does that work in your environment? Is it select your data for production and then or how are you doing that?
Great question. So Marlene's question was, with regard to sandbox seeding, how does that work with CapStorm? The way that it works, Marlene, is again, it all starts at CapStorm, replicating the data schema and metadata from production to the customer's relational database. You do not have to replicate everything. CapStorm is bound by the permissions of the Salesforce credentials provided for the running user. So if you give it like a super admin with view all data permissions, you can allow it to pull down everything that's available over the publicly facing APIs, but you can also limit it based on the user's credentials. Furthermore, you can choose from within this UI which objects to include or exclude. Then, once the source is replicated into the customer's relational database, this application gives a user interface where you can say, I would like 30 random accounts from production, and I want to make sure that the industry is telecom, and all of them have to have opportunities that closed within the past 90 days that were over $500,000. Go. It will do that, but it will also allow you to drill down into the related lists with limitless complexity. So we're not limited to, parent and child, or parent, child, grandchild. It can literally do all of it. Depending on how much time we have today, I'm happy to give a little demo. That's actually what I think is the #1 thing that sets apart in the industry, the ability to manage hierarchical integrity to a limitless complexity when moving hierarchical data between different works. It's really, really cool.
Sandbox. Salesforce functionality gives you records that are not associated with the other ones. You might get a count but not contacts. And that's really painful.
It's frustrating.
Find, and if you're testing, it's not valid testing. So that's really what we're solving here. You have a whole unit of data, not just one record.
Correct. And it's a representative subset of the whole without the entire volume. So if you're pulling prod and your prod org is 2 terabytes, data and files combined, and you're trying to push it into a 500 megabyte partial copy, you're going to have to limit. The good news is, when limiting, you don't have to orphan all the data. You can keep, I like to think of it as like Tinker Toys that we played with when we were kids. You can grab just a little selection and move it from here to there without pulling all the sticks out of the nodes. BM says, can it take backup for masked records? So to the question from BM, if you could be so kind to send in a clarifier, I think what you're asking is, if something is masked in Salesforce, what is the behavior when it replicates to the database? Is that correct? Did I interpret it correctly? Yeah, okay. So again, the CopyStorm application it's required to honor the Salesforce permissions of the running user. So if that user cannot see human readable data, it will pull the masked value down. If it's represented as 8 asterisks on the social security field on the contact object, it will pull down 8 asterisks into the SQL database, and it will not be unmaskable, I guess, because it's pulling the asterisk down. Hope that answers your question. Cool. All right. Now, if any of you have to support or have supported integrations or ETL workflows, hey boys, please, with like a Informatica or MuleSoft or Jitterbit or something like that. One of the things that's unique about this technology is that when this software replicates the Salesforce data model to here, you'll notice that I said not just the data, not just the metadata, but the schema as well. So usually an enterprise customer is constantly developing in their Salesforce work. They have software development life cycle, they have sprints, they have deployments, and production is changing on a regular basis. The integration teams or the BI and analytics teams, their integrations break when this changes. But what we're really proud of is the ability to offer a solution that's inspecting for schema changes and automatically replicating those down. So if you drop a table, you can tell the software, drop it from the database. Or if you don't want to make a destructive change to the SQL database, tell it to retain it, but mark it at, is deleted equals true. So it basically removes the need to telegraph changes to your integrations team every time the Salesforce data model changes, so that the integrations, ETL, the reporting workloads don't have to break every time the data model changes. It's very useful for that. Jatin says, how does data get replicated every 3 minutes? Is it pushed from Salesforce to CopyStorm or pull? Great question. Jatin, you can think of sorry, let me put this out of the way. You can think of this application, the CopyStorm app, as middleware. It's hitting the Salesforce APIs based on last modified timestamps, comparing the last modified timestamps in the SQL database to the last modified timestamps in the Salesforce org to determine what the deltas are. And then it's incrementally pulling those deltas from Salesforce and writing them to the database. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. So it will basically consume the APIs, right? It will consume Salesforce APIs.
I'll keep an eye
And I'm
on
not sure.
that.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me okay?
I'm sorry? As often as every 3 minutes. And I get asked a lot, well, isn't that going to blow through my API consumption? The answer is no, because it's only pulling the incremental changes. So if you did it once a day versus every 5 minutes, you're going to have almost the same API consumption, with the exception of a little bootstrapping each time a job fires to pull the latest changes from Salesforce, because it's, again, based on what has changed since the previous run, and that's it. You look like you might have a follow-up question. I see the wheels turning.
No, okay, I would say.
Okay.
It's not affecting to the usability of the like it's not going down the systems.
No, not at all.
It's by vertical, right? It's going downstream, it's
That's right. So I recognize you, but I don't remember your name.
John.
John. You're a coastal cloud. Was a coastal cloud. The CopyStorm is pulling from Salesforce to database. Restore is pushing from database to Salesforce. So they're two separate applications. We get asked a lot, well, why did you do it that way? And a lot of times, well, the reason is most of the time, the people who are interested in CopyStorm are database administrators. They have zero knowledge of Salesforce. They don't care. Their IT director just told them, make sure this system is backed up. They plug in Salesforce credentials, plug in database credentials, set up a snapshotting regimen, and then their job is done. The people that use Restore are the admins that need to recover to production, are the developers that need to populate their scratch works with production metadata and then data. They're the architects that have to ingest data from SAP into the empty Salesforce schema and then build a scripted CI/CD pipe to get the data into the production org. So long story short, the end users are very different based on the direction that the data flows.
So if you have like a break fix board and UAT board, that's where you can follow the sort of command decisions.
I'm not sure I understand the question.
So there's, let's say there had to be like, there's one sandbox there that you do a break fix or something.
Uh-huh.
Right?
Yeah.
And then push that to like, about
Yeah.
testing.
Yeah.
Once it got approved. Okay.
Yep.
So all of that happens, all that tracking happens right there. You can see it in the door, or-
That's a great question. Yes. So in John's scenario, let's pretend we've got Dev 1 to Dev 2 to QA to UAT to prod. If some custom development happens in Dev 1, you like it, you pull it out to maybe a Postgres database and push it up to Dev 2. Tinker around with it there, pull it out, push it up to QA. Tinker around with it again, give it to your users in UAT, they like it, pull down maybe some flows or triggers or something, and then deploy them directly to production. So sky's the limit on how many different pulls and pushes you can do between different sandboxes before you eventually reach production. But this application, it actually it maintains a lightweight SQL database as a tracker. So all the work that you would normally be doing, actually I've spoken with your former company's data architects at great length about how much easier it can be if you programmatically allow software to manage the mappings, calculate the load order of all the dependencies, manage all the layers of recursion in the customer's unique data model so that you don't have to map that out by hand. It's laborious, it's error prone. There's a lot of data types that you just can't support with CSVs, and most people end up crying at their keyboard at 3 o'clock in the morning on cutover weekend because it's just too hard to get it done with any level of accuracy and efficiency. All right. Let's see. Marlene, I should ask, do I have until 7:30 or 7:15? Yeah, okay. The questions have been really great. I think what we'll do is we'll just go ahead and keep moving. And I'm going to try to save a few minutes for just a live demo so everybody can see how things work. By show of hands, who in the room is a Salesforce architect, technical architect, solutions architect? One-ish over there, Gary, 4 maybe. Okay. So this slide is for you. If you're an architect, either by name or by function or a combination of both. I have a friend that her name's Melissa, and we talked about this at a meeting about a year ago. But basically, we've been advising Salesforce customers to use SQL databases to stage their data, not only their data from the source, but their target data model for almost a decade. And we had no idea that the Salesforce CTAs basically advise the same thing. So we kind of aligned on that last year. But there's a number of reasons why this is so important. So if you've ever been involved in an org merger, greenfields or brownfields migration, or even an org split, there's a number of reasons why you might want to consider doing that. So these are my boys. I should have introduced them ahead of time, but Silas on your right, it's 8, Jonah 7. They made a trip with me for the very first time. So, huh? Yeah, you made it. Anyway, back to this. Replicating incremental changes from your source org to a staging database basically allows you to work around Salesforce APIs by turning a Salesforce migration problem into a database migration problem. It's a solve problem. Nobody can go Salesforce to Salesforce direct with a high level of efficiency, accuracy, or if they can do it, it's going to cost you mid 6 figures. It's insanely expensive. Then, by virtue of having the source data model in a staging environment and an empty schema copy of your target, you're able to use industry standard or even in-house transformation tools to take, this is a terrible example, but something that might be called company here is called account here. And once you build those transformation scripts, you can gradually build a continuous migration of source data as this system is live into your target system. Now, we always advise the org migration to be tested and the configs to be tested on lower sandbox environments so that you can validate your configs and make sure that everything works properly. But once you do that, the great thing is if you're on a 9-month org migration project, you can have 90% of the data migrated 3 weeks before cutover because you've tested and used your configs over and over and over, and you know that they work. Then on cutover weekend, you just wash, rinse, repeat, and get the latest deltas from here using the templates that you built to migrate the hierarchical data. So it doesn't have to be this big bang, horrible experience where it's not on time, it's not on budget, the client's angry, and it just doesn't work out well. Any thoughts, feedback, critiques on this idea? Anything's welcome.
Does your software support the transformation or that?
We do not. But the fact that you asked that on a recorded meeting means that I'm going to take it back to our engineers. Because I've been saying for about 5 years, guys, I know that we have the smarts in-house to do this, and the response is always, and I love our engineers, but they're like, yeah, it's a solved problem. We're not even going to try to get into that market. But the funny thing is, we had a consulting agency basically say, well, you already do the E, you already do the L, you might as well figure out how to do the T as well. So it's a one-stop shop for the consulting firm. I hear you. It's a great question though.
I know we covered earlier.
Huh?
Can you set how much APIs?
Yeah, that's a great question. So for those who are online, Marlene asked, with regards to API consumption, is there a way to set limits or maybe throttle the API consumption so that you don't blow through your budgeted API allotment? The answer is yes. And I think now would be a really natural time to just take a look at the software because there are a handful of parameters that are configurable to do this exact thing. How do I hide this? Oh, y'all can't see it anyway. So Marlene, this is the CopyStorm application, the one that pulls from Salesforce to database. Can you see it okay? It's pretty small. Let's see, I don't know if I can stand by, please. Well, yeah, okay, well, let me just point then. On the left-hand side of the screen, we've provided credentials for the org we're pulling from. On the right, we've provided credentials for the database we're pushing to. Now, you didn't see me enter the credentials. They're stored in a credential manner in a web interface. Boring to look at, but you can create a list of your different endpoints and then just pull them from a dropdown. Oh. On our configuration tab here, there's a Salesforce API radio button. So you can see that I can control how many threads to hit Salesforce with concurrently, and I can set limits. Now, do not exceed this maximum threshold. If you have 1 million API calls per day and you're already at 950,000, you may decide I only want to go 40K more to save a buffer of 10K. And because it's incremental and always based on last modified timestamps, it will gracefully shut down when it hits that threshold and pick up exactly where it left off, because its bookmark is the timestamp. Yeah. Yes, the sysmod timestamp, I guess, is the right. Yeah. Let's see. If I had to guess, somebody's probably thinking, well, what about formula fields? Those are calculated values and there's no modified by a timestamp. We have that solved. So there's an ancillary tool that will look for formula fields and compare changed values to between the database and the Salesforce work. So anyway.
How does it decide to do that?
How does it decide what?
How does it decide when to compare the formula?
It's scheduled. You tell it, hey, on these objects and these columns, I need you to watch for these, and then just it runs on a scheduled process with this database. Beyond this, I mean, we simply click start. This is an empty Postgres database in my case. It's going to look at the data model in Salesforce. First, it'll replicate the schema down, table for table, field for field, bring down our records. Nobody runs it from the UI. It looks like it was built in 1995. And they just schedule it, let it run in the background on an EC2 instance in AWS, and don't think about it. But beyond that, you can pick which objects to include, to not include. You can actually do exhaustive field history tracking on this database because Salesforce, you're limited to 20 fields per object. You can work around that and do it at the database layer and basically have limitless change data capture, auditability for litigation purposes if you wanted. And let's see, yeah, there's notifications. We have a dashboard package that we give away for free just to monitor the status, changes, deletes, all that kind of stuff. But this application, very powerful, super boring. You plug it in, schedule it, forget about it, and it just does its thing. So if there are no questions here, I'll move on, but I want to pause. Looks like we might have an online question. Ah, yes. Thank you, Marlene. Marlene says, CapStorm is sponsoring a giveaway of 4 gift cards. Those are 4 Amazon gift cards in the amount of $50 a piece. For these, we will include the virtual and in-person attendees. So stick around if you'd like a chance to win. Big secret. This is my super sneaky way of hopefully getting contact information for anybody who's interested in talking with us later. I don't think so.
What is the licensing model for CapStorm?
Oh, that's a great question. What's your name?
My name is Brock.
Brock. Brock asked for the online group. What's the license model look like? It is licensed per production org. Have you heard of a solutions license like that before? Have you? Okay. Because most of the time people say, oh, that's interesting. I thought it would be by user, by Salesforce user licenses or by data volumes or something like that. We don't care how many users you have. We don't know. We can't see how much data you have unless you decide you want to tell us. So the real value in our minds and what we're providing is how many different production orgs can you pull from and push to. And we also include, depending on what product you buy, you usually get 5 or 10 sandboxes included per production org.
Okay, so it's not limited. You also have limits on what you can do in lower environments.
What do you mean?
Let's just say we have 100 developer sandbox. We'd only be able to use 10, or we could
I mean, buy more. We usually
okay,
like
so the license. Okay.
Yeah, you
have to buy more. Okay,
honestly, if we're working with an enterprise client, we usually throw them in as a at a negotiation stage. Oh, you want 20 more? Sure, no problem. Salesforce gives them away practically for free anyway. So it doesn't really, I mean, from our perspective, it costs us absolutely nothing to ship software. Yeah.
About on the RDBM or the database side.
Great question. So each license plan comes with 1 RDBMS relational database flavor. Usually that's enough. Sometimes a customer is using like Oracle and SQL Server simultaneously, at which point it's $10K per connector for a year. We also do, I didn't really talk about this. On the slide that I had shown earlier, some of you may have noticed that we replicate to Snowflake and Redshift as well. So those would be more like the data warehousing and analytics databases. Those are a different product and price point based on use cases they're supporting. But if you wanted all 6 of them, you can have them. You just got to pay for them. Additional connectors. Yeah. So you're. That's right. Yeah. Yeah, and I honestly, Marlene, I have no idea if that difference is bigger or smaller. I have no idea. Yeah, that sounds about right. But I've been in the Salesforce world for almost 7 years, and I know very, very little about their pricing. Everything that I do know about it is stuff that's available just from a quick Google search, which is not much, or what a customer anecdotally just shares with me. So, yeah. Yeah. Yep. Exactly. Now that brings up another. I should have said this earlier. So we recently launched a new archival product. Excuse me. Where because our customers are mostly enterprise, they have large data volumes, and they're always coming up against additional storage spend with Salesforce, which is very, very high. Salesforce is not a great place to just store data. And so what we do is we replicate that data into the SQL database, give them the ability to do an impact analysis on the purge, and set parameters like don't keep cases that are older than 300 days old or something like that. It will auto purge them from Salesforce and show them a downstream impact analysis of what will be affected. I like to think of it kind of like if you've ever used Elements Cloud, they kind of have some of those edited. So it's similar to that. And then a data viewer, so that after it's been purged from Salesforce, you can see the data somewhere else externally. Some of our customers are actually doing a kind of a hybrid project for them right now, which we don't do often, to use their Salesforce Connect licensing and an OData bridge into the CopyStorm database to show the external data in Salesforce as if it existed in Salesforce.
One question, part of purging. The same way that you see data, right? So you can see the case, have everything that's related to the case. If say I want to archive or purge that case, is it also all the credentials or is it something like that?
So the cascade delete effect on, sorry, then it wouldn't. But what we do, I can actually show this in a little bit. I use a Python library to run a delete script against my Trailhead orgs in between demos. So I can populate it with a bunch of data, run a script, and then in 30 seconds, it's all gone. And I can refresh my sandbox 30 times a day without actually refreshing it with Salesforce. So we have a question from somebody. Christine, can the pre-merge orgs be restored from the backups? Okay, so I think this would mean, Christine, I'm going to tell you what I think I mean, and then tell me if I got it right. You have orgs A and B that need to be merged into C, or maybe A gets merged into B or B gets merged into A, it doesn't really matter. Can they be restored from the backup? So I think what that means is if you took a backup of the pre-merge state, can you return to a historic point in time in the production org? If that is your question, the answer is yes. The CopyStorm software has its own snapshotting capabilities built in. So I like to think of it as the output database or the backup database, the replication database, having two main functions. Yes, awesome. Okay. That database has the primary volume is going to be a set of transactional tables. You can think of these as like hot copy tables of of the production org. If something changes in Salesforce, it immediately or upon the next replication job changes in the database. And then the snapshotting capabilities use a separate set of tables, a different schema inside the same database to store snapshotted data. So if that data gets deleted from Salesforce, it will retain a version history or an archive history in the same database, separate from those transactional or hot copy tables. So you might have reporting running on the primary database tables, but then your point in time recovery or your versioning and recovery from historic points in time is powered by the archive tables. Does that answer your question? Sweet. That answers the question. I love it.
Big object, that's all supported.
It is. As of actually, John, we lost a big customer about 3 years ago because we didn't do it. And so we rapidly fixed that problem. But yes, it is supported. If you want to know exactly how, I'm going to have to connect you to one of our engineers. Yeah, absolutely. I don't know exactly how it works. I've listened to multiple conversations sitting down with our engineers and thought, there's no way. I'm never going to grasp this. I just need to connect people to them when it comes up. So be happy to do that. Let's look at the restore software. And that's what you see up on my screen right now. So it looks very similar to the other application that I just showed. But in this case, we're pushing to this production org. And actually, it's a Trailhead sandbox, which basically Salesforce represents as a prod org. And we're pushing from the local Postgres database that I just created as a backup of org A. And now we're pushing to org B. That's really small for you guys, isn't it? Yeah. So the way that it's rendered inside the web page, no, because I'm doing Control+ on my screen. I don't think. Oh, actually, I guess I can. That worked. See if it doesn't mess it up. Is that a little bit better? Yeah. Okay. All right. So on this tab, this is the Restore Set Editor tab. This is where we get to be kind of the master of our own ship. What exactly is it that we want to push to our target org? You can start anywhere in your data model. And just a heads up, because I did the zoom, I'm not sure if this is going to render properly. So if it doesn't, just so you know. But anyway, you can start anywhere. Standard object, custom objects, managed package objects, and then regardless of where you start, you from that epicenter, if you will, you can expand out and grab related lists. So I usually go with accounts because everybody knows what they are. There's stuff up, down, left, and right of that object in the diagram. Then we decide which accounts. Do we want all of them? Probably not. Again, because in Marlene's case, we're pulling from production and pushing to a sandbox that there's no way we can fit all of that production data into. So we could write a SQL query if you're SQL savvy. I'm not. We could say, give me 100 random accounts or maybe 50 random accounts. And then we could further specify, like, this is where I said 50 random accounts, but the industry has to be telecommunications. So I can specify that criteria. I can do and, or, not, operators, whatever I need. Then we're going to decide what to do with reference fields. So for example, if I'm restoring an account as a part of these 100 random accounts, and one of those or multiple of those happen to have a parent record, what should we do? Should we skip that record? Should we create the record? Should we restore the account record but not parent? So you have decisions to make there, but we'll allow you to support all the above. Fields should be pretty self-explanatory. This could be a single phone number on a single contact record. It could be every field on every record or anything in between. But here's the part that I believe 99.9% certain that none of you have seen this before. If we are pushing whatever 50, 100 random accounts to this sandbox, they're not going to be very useful for Marlene's development purposes unless she has the related contacts. And under those related contacts, let's see what we have. Oops. We have some assets and we have some cases. And under those cases, we have some more stuff like attachments and case comments. And under those case comments, we have flow orchestration work item, whatever that means. And further down the rabbit hole. So that one was like 7 layers, not too bad. But you know, I've been in this space, in this actually niche for 6.5 years, and I know who the players are in the market. I know where they do well, where they don't do well. Nobody can do this. So if you're in the scenario where you need to, you know, grab a parent and child, there's 13 vendors out there that can do it for you. If you want to grab a lot of data and absolutely everything related, I'm pretty sure we're the only ones that can do it. So we'll tell the software, go find everything for me, and just let it do the work. So it's crawling my data model, doing with in mathematic or technical terms a graph traversal of my data model. This isn't just the standard Salesforce data model. It includes everything that you have in your org. And on the restore plan tab, it shows us to load or to restore these 100 accounts and everything related. It's actually going to touch 115 different tables. And this is not a random order. This is the order in which it needs to be restored to preserve all the referential integrity based on this dependency mapping, which it just calculated for us on the fly. So I don't know if anybody's ever had to move 115 tables from org A into org B where they didn't exist, you know, between, but it would be a real mess. So any questions here?
Once you've mapped all of this out.
That's right. So up in the upper left-hand corner, I know it's super small where it's sitting, there's a file button, hit save. And then all of the buttons that we've clicked, that's all saved. And so if you ran this restore config on Monday, and then you ran it again 7 days later, it would know, you know, what your wishes were, but it also keep track of, oh, I already ran this config against the data, and you know, 93% of this data just needs to be updated. There's only a 7% delta, so we're going to insert those deltas as opposed to creating a bunch of duplicate data in the particle. Let's see if there's any questions from the online group. There are not. Okay. Now, what I just showed was how to configure the migration, basically, of hierarchical data from Salesforce org A to Salesforce org B, assuming that the schemas are different. We did this in the context of Marlene's question about sandbox seeding. But I want everyone to realize that all of this configuration, all of the actual execution and the movement of the data, it's the same process for a prod to prod migration. Now you might have to do some more transformation, but it's still the same software, moving the data in the same manner, calculating the load order, managing the mappings between the old to new record IDs for you. So it's a same familiar process. So what you're doing on a day-to-day basis for sandbox seeding is your production recovery process. And you can be super familiar with it. Usually someone asks about like triggers or validation rules or flows or something like that. You have the ability to programmatically manage them from within the advanced tab. You can say something like, oh, I just want to turn this one off. Or you can say, no, just manage all of them for me. And then when the load job or the restore job starts, it will turn them off, push the data, and then turn everything back on again after it's finished. I don't know.
They drew with that just with shops and clothes and clothes or profiles and all that stuff as well.
What
To
do
do with like other attributes, like profiles.
you,
And
permission? So I think what you're asking is if the automation is related to profiles and permission sets, can it do that?
Yeah.
Yes. Now, everything that I'm showing you here is about the movement of hierarchical data. There's a metadata tab here as well. I usually don't go into this because we're not a full-on DevOps suite like a Gear Set or Capado or AutoRabbit or something like that. Now, we do allow you to pull metadata from a source. It will version it. It will allow you to compare versions. It will give you a diff text editor. Here's what it looks like in the source. Here's what it looks like in the target. Here's what's different. But we don't integrate with Git. So it's
can you at least tell you what's enabled and what's not enabled? Like,
yes. Yes, I believe so. So yeah, exactly. So let's let's do, let me think. So if we were to, what we're doing right now is looking at deploying components of some custom development on the account object from maybe sandbox 1 into sandbox 2. And I could say anything, any fields that are custom, let's grab all those and we're going to push them to sandbox 2. I have this version drop down where if anything had changed in the backup of the source, you'd have multiple timestamps here showing versions of that metadata as it changed over time. And then we can go into this little expert mode drop down here to take a look at the actual metadata. So I think that's what you're wanting to see, but I'm not really sure. Does that hit the high points, John, or no?
yeah.
Kind of, sort of? Okay. Oh yeah. Finally, someone always asks about, what about masking sensitive data? Hey, Silas, will you please come sit over here? So if we have some related contacts that are about to be loaded into the target org related to the accounts that we selected, I could click on the contact object, go to fields, and then down at the bottom, you'll see there's obfuscation and masking. So these are just transformers built into the software. You can anonymize or obfuscate data on the fly as a part of the load process to your target sandbox. So maybe I want to do like an alphanumeric character substitution for an email address. There's a lot of library of different anonymization methods built in here. And maybe we have social security numbers or account balances, whatever. You can asterisk them out and it will do that transformation on the fly.
So you said you didn't do transformations. You've got the automation here.
Anonymization, yeah.
Yeah. Do you have a way to like append or prefix something in any of the fields? Or is that
To the schema or to the data?
Email is a great example. Let's say that instead of randomizing email addresses, we wanted to keep the email address, but add something.
Absolutely, but .ext, yeah, .ext or something. Yeah, sure. So the transformation algorithms are pluggable. I know that it has something to do with implementing a Java class to build your own transformer. I don't know how to do it. On our learning site, there is an article on how to do it. But again, this would be a, let me connect you to our engineers type of question. So yeah.
Can we take a step back to data governance?
Yeah.
Instead, the masking of truncated.
Mhm. Mhm.
What if that sensitive data point is embedded in a case note? Okay.
If the sensitive, okay, or like a rich text. Yeah, absolutely.
So it's a summary.
Yep.
Within the summary, it has
Yeah.
that button.
So what I know we could do, and there's a way to handle it. My concern is it too much of a sledgehammer as opposed to a scalpel approach to what you might be looking for? The govern application, which I showed it, I didn't show the app itself, but I represented with the icon on the diagram. One could say, these fields on these objects inside the CopyStorm backup database are considered PII data. So you have a PII classification, and you can also do a masking treatment on those fields in those objects. So maybe it's, what was the field called again? Summary?
Case note.
Case notes, yeah. Or let's say it's account description or contact description. You can mask whatever's in that column in the CopyStorm database, like a lorem ipsum text, asterisk, many different anonymization methods. And then depending on who's trying to query that database or even restore it to Salesforce, they may or may not be able to see and read that data depending on who they are. And the way that that's controlled is the user access controls within the govern application, which modifies authorization on the SQL database. So it basically protects the SQL database based on whatever requirements your GRC team says they need. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. I'm running into an issue right now, but yeah.
You know, the thinking about how to say this. It would probably shock some of you, but then again, you're architects, so maybe not. It might not shock you. How many highly regulated companies in the world take an approach of, we're not mature enough for that yet. We're just going to encrypt the entire database. And how they can operate on a day-to-day basis by just, hitting that database with a sledgehammer of encryption, I have no idea. But it's the world we live in. I don't know if anybody read about the, what's that company called? CARE. It's part of UHG, United Health Group. The one that was just hacked. The name's going to come to me, but it's not advanced care. It's something. But anyway, I listened to a podcast on the drive down here. And the guy, they interviewed this rear admiral of some agency inside the federal government. And he said, what people really need to be able to do is have redundancy and to be able to back up and to go back to a specific point in time and identify this was right, right before the incident happened, and not only have redundancy, but be able to go back in time. And I was like, preach, man, that's my message. But he was telling my story for me about backups and point in time recovery and version control and reverting right before the incident occurred. Anyway, it's a real, everybody's dealing with it. And if you're in healthcare, if you're in the federal government, if you're in finance, you're definitely dealing with it. So anyway.
Do you support Postgres with other databases?
Yeah, so the traditional RDBMSs would be Postgres, Oracle, SQL Server, and MySQL. We also support MariaDB, but nobody uses it. Like, it's old. And then replication only for Snowflake and Redshift. All right, let's finish this just so that we have, I don't want to use up all of our time. So the gentleman here asked if we can save the information. The answer was yes. Just do a file save and we can reuse that config and point it at a bunch of different sandboxes. So all 100 of your devs get their own private developer org with the exact same anonymized gold data set from production. Then we're going to go here to the restore tab, do a little size estimate down at the bottom to make sure that what we're about to push into our sandbox will actually fit. So it's scanning my Postgres database to identify restore candidates based on the criteria that I just gave it. It's queuing them up, getting them ready. Oh, and just to prove that I'm not playing any sneaky tricks, here's our sandbox. It's totally empty. And it has found a bunch of records. For those of you who might still be unbelievers, here's the tracker database. This is that H2 database that I was talking about. For those of you in the back, you probably can't see. On the far left-hand side, you've got the original 18-character record ID from the source org. The restored ID is blank because we haven't pushed anything into the target sandbox yet, but the software will harvest the newly assigned ID and handle the mappings for us, so that every other record that looks up to or references that ID on down in the hierarchy can be patched in appropriately. And then there's a status column that says pending because we haven't actually run the load yet. And this is what the software maintains kind of to do its own accounting or bookkeeping, so that if we did run the same config 3 months later, it remembers what the work that it's already done. So we'll run this restore and be done in a whoop. That's fine. So in about hopefully 30 seconds, we'll have all this data in the sandbox. Otherwise, I'm gonna look like a big dummy. Any questions while we're waiting?
Why are lemons sour?
That's I'll tell you. I've got about 7 gray hairs on the sides of my head. All right. All right, so if we refresh, we should have a bunch of test data here. And there's our accounts. Hey, if you two need to be goofy, you can go do it outside. And then there's our related data. So we have some related contacts. And I think I did say go ahead and scramble the email address. So we did that. And it looks exactly like you expect it to. So we've taken 45 minutes to an hour end to end. But if you use this every day, jumping in, opening a canned config that you had built, executing it could literally take 2 minutes. Oh, and I promised you that I would show that Python script. So I'm going to stop sharing real quick and then share again.
Wow.
But this is about the end of my presentation. So if there are any other questions, now would be a great time to ask.
Features available?
Yes. So piecemeal. So the full on like OData bridge is not ready yet. Because we're on a recorded line, I'm not going to give an answer, but I'd be more than happy to talk to you after we stop recording. Is there what? Oh, it can happen. Absolutely. It can absolutely happen. So let me think of so I lead our enterprise sales team, and I'm every Friday I go through training and I'm teaching them how to do all of this end to end, set up their own Trailhead orgs, run their demos, wipe the demo orgs, etc. And every Friday somebody has some sort of problem. Like let's say that there's some data inside the CopyStorm database that used to not have a validation rule, but the org that you're pushing to now does. You'll get the same exact error from the Salesforce API within the restore application. It will give you a list of exceptions. I might even have some. Let me take a look. Yeah, we do have a couple. Let's take a look. Feed item type create record event cannot be imported. I'm having a hard time expanding this window. Oh, there we go. Come on. Via the API. I don't know why, but there you go. It's just because we can manage hierarchical relationships really well does not mean that we take away the need to understand your org or your automation or something like that. So yeah, it's not a silver bullet.
So is there like an ID there or something that the element to look at that?
Yep, right here. Yeah, it's the third column from the left.
This is our
to manage any fails right there.
Yes. Mhm. So if you can't see my screen super clearly, in the bottom right-hand corner, there's a skipped reasons button. So it'll queue up, let's say 10,000 records, and it says 1,300 of these. Hey, you've got a problem here. Maybe you don't have the right permissions on the user that's running this, or maybe you've got a validation rule that you forgot to turn off, or the list goes on and on and on. But at least we'll help you isolate them quickly. And because, oh yeah, because the tracker database has kept track of everything that it's done, you'll see it has in the left column here, the original IDs, the newly restored IDs. If you just need to go, oh yeah, I forgot to turn off this validation rule, go turn it off, rerun the job. And if that's what was causing the 1,300 errors, you just fix the problem without creating a bunch of duplicate data again.
So I think, sorry, maybe repeat.
Mhm.
So if someone does make a change, database, you have that.
Mhm.
Can I see the username or who made that sort of change? It's obviously something done back in Salesforce like that. Can I
It's,
see if there's some tracking in there, understand. what
So
you're doing?
what the scenario that I'm describing is somebody changed the Salesforce data model or some automation or some metadata such that the legacy data that's been backed up that you're trying to restore into the sandbox doesn't fit for reasons X, Y, and Z. If the change is made in Salesforce, it has a modified by timestamp, which are captured in the CopyStorm database. So you can query and look at the versions of that data and say, who did it? What time did they do it? What change was made? Show me the historic versions. Let me compare the versions of this record or of this metadata object. It's all inside the database.
They're the opposites. Some like the BI, like the IT learning.
They modified the database records, but not Salesforce. That's a good question.
No, don't worry, I was just curious.
I'm not a DBA, but my gut tells me that
There's someone that like who I have to talk to because of that area,
yeah,
That thing just sits outside of Salesforce.
yeah. So given what I know about databases, the people who run them, they have to be auditable. Like you can't have it's not the wild, wild west. I would be absolutely shocked if that's not possible, because if it was impossible, you would not be able to stake billion-dollar legal claims on looking at a database, and people do that every day. So I don't know the exact ins and outs, but I know it's a solved problem. Just don't know how. Yeah, so I think I'm going to stop here. We're right at time. I would like to say thank you. I do this a lot. Travel to user groups, do virtual presentations, and I'm on the phone all day with customers and prospects. This is probably one of the most engaging groups I've ever had. So seriously, thank you so much. We are going to do raffle off 4 $50 Amazon gift cards. So Marlene, did you take the wheel of names information down? Awesome. Yep.